Welcome to the Duke Gallery. My name is Stephen West. I consider myself in a brotherhood and a companionship with a number of wildlife artists that we classify ourselves as wildlife naturalists, in which we are concerned and like to bring to the public the awareness of the magnificent creations of wildlife as well as the natural beauty in nature. My beginnings and my start of this great adventure took place when I was fairly young. I remember when I was 11 or 12, my art teacher asked if I would be interested in learning to do some oil painting. And I thought, well, sure, I'd like to try to do that. And so my parents brought home for me and presented to me my first wooden box of oil paints. And that opened up the door of me being able to experiment and to use some of those exciting colors like alizarin crimson. Just the name of the paint got me excited. Alizarin crimson, cadmium red light, those were fun colors to talk about. I also wanted just to kind of share my beginning in regards to, it was 2 or 3 years later when I was in high school. I was taking a summer school class at the University of Utah, and the professor was a well-known artist, landscape artist in the western United States. His name was LeConte Stewart, and he happened to be the instructor. And one day before we went out to paint, he offered a challenge to us. He said there's about 16 of us. He said, I would like when you go out to paint today to see how many shades of green that you can find and that you can paint in your painting. And I want you to know that initially 2 or 3 of us, you can imagine at 13, 14, we thought, what is he talking about? There's green, there's light green and dark green. What is he talking about? Find how many greens. But we went out and we took it kind of lightheartedly, and we looked, and lo and behold, we discovered that there's maybe 1 or 2 more values that we saw besides the 3. So we got excited and we started to put those down. Well, we ended up with maybe 5 or 6 different greens that we could share in our next class. What I wanted to bring out to you is that LeConte Stewart brought in his painting that he worked on the same day, and I was blown away. When he brought in his canvas, he had 12 to 18 different shades, values of green, and that really impressed me. And it made me stop and think, and it was no longer a laughing matter. It was, well, how did he see that many shades of green? Well, I've learned since then that we train when we go out, whether it be a camera or whether it be a canvas or a watercolor. When we study, we draw, and we look, we train our eye to see more, and we are able to see more. And so over the years, I have been able to see more shades of green, and I've been able to see different shades and colors of different colors. And that's what I'm showing today, and hoping that you can enjoy some of my findings and my paintings as I have been out doing that in nature. This painting that I'm going to talk about is called the Black-crowned Night Heron, and it is done at night. And I did that deliberately as a painting that I wanted to show a night scene And I deliberately picked the night crown black heron because as you look at the coloring of the sky and the moon and the ground, you will see that the feathers of the bird blend and work in the same values and colors as the night sky, and the highlights and the white areas of the bird pick up the coloring and the values of the moon. And the reason behind bringing that subject matter forward is it's important that we understand the coloring of wildlife and birds is not by accident. These birds and wildlife have the coloring they do, one, for protection. When they are in their space and surroundings, they use the coloring of their skin, the coloring of their feathers to help camouflage them from the prey that prey after them. In the case of the night heron, it's the great horned owl. At night, the great horned owl is the master of the night sky. And so this bird, when you look at it, you say, well, he's out there in the open and he's just a target for the great horned owl. Well, if we look closely at the coloring of his feathers, they blend into the sky color. And so when an owl is flying and he's looking around with that blending happening on those feathers, it makes it more difficult for the owl to spot these birds. And so again, it brings out to me, and I hope to you, that there's no accident in why these birds and animals have certain coloring to them. The next painting I'd like to talk about is the sand crane in the marsh. That painting is done deliberately at dusk as the sun is going down. A lot of times when we think of landscape paintings, we think of a painting with blue sky, right? And blue water and green trees. And one of the things that I wanted to bring to my audience and the people seeing that painting is that there is color, more color than just blue, green in nature. Skies, every night the sky coloring is different, and it's exciting to watch the sunset and the sky colors as the sun is going down. And so my purpose in that particular painting is to bring out to the viewer the beauty and excitement that happens with the variety of, when light hits on that sky area, the variety of color that can be introduced into that area. I consider my relationship over the years to be a very close relationship. As I go out each time, as I've gone out over the years, what is evident to me each time that I go out is that I marvel at the design and the coloring that I'm able to see for the first time. Or I may have seen it the last time, but I see it under a new light, and it is completely different. Case in point, my wife and I take walks at night together, and she pointed out one night, "Stephen, do you notice the bark of that tree?" And you're going to see that in my paintings, and I have some samples of bark that I brought in, but it's real exciting. The design in which is in the texture of the bark, The textures vary, the textures repeat. The textures change when it goes down to the root system and the beautiful patterns that are formed by the roots of the tree. So those types of experiences draw me closer to nature. It brings me closer to realize the design that our Creator is indeed a master creator by way of how He uses the elements of design in the various forms that are in nature. My interest in wildlife was developed when I was about 8 or 9, wanting to learn how to fish, and I also wanted to go out with my cousin that was a forest ranger, and during the winter months, he being a forest ranger, they had to feed the new elk that were being implanted in the Utah mountains, the Wasatch Mountains. And so it was exciting to see these big Roosevelt elk come out of the trees. And as we laid out the hay and the salt for them to see these magnificent animals. And more importantly, the thing that really got me excited is, it's something when I see an elk and then I hear them, it brings back, when you hear a bull elk bugle, my hair on the back of my neck stands straight up. It is the most profound sound, and it's echoed across the canyon. It's just really a magnificent sound. And that brought a real thrill to me, and got me really wanting to be interested in drawing wildlife. When I was in college, in order to make a living, I had to work in the graphics and advertising field, and but I had a longing at the same time to keep my art going, and especially landscape. And one of the things that I really wanted to do when I really got involved in my painting was to include wildlife in my landscape. I felt when I did a landscape just to put trees, skies, and water in, there was something missing. And this comes back to my understanding and learning that wildlife and the elements of nature all have an inner relationship and work together. The elk have an impact on the plants and vegetation of the surroundings that they live in. Case in point, look at Yellowstone. For years, about 15, 20 years ago, there was an overpopulation of the Roosevelt elk. And grasses, bushes were becoming damaged, and pasture or grasslands were being lost. And it's because of the buffalo and the elk. Well, when the conservationists and the Forest Service decided to reintroduce the wolf, guess what happened? The balance of nature was able to take its rightful place. The wolf came in, thinned out the buffalo, and thinned out the elk, and that allowing more grass areas to take place and thrive. And what else was introduced? The beaver. And so beaver ponds were introduced, and the whole environment has been really a great deal of restoration has happened in the Yellowstone area because of what? The gray wolf that came in and that was taken out and now has been reintroduced back into that environment. That's a good question. I thank you for asking that. My conflict I had for years is I thought I had to be either a photographer or an artist. And I want to say today, and especially the last 5 or 6 years, I really enjoy doing photography. I use it for my research. There's no way that I can paint or draw fast enough the cocking or gesture of a bird's head or an elk moving. I can do some quick sketches, but photography has helped me greatly by way of recording more accurately the gesture or the movement of the muscle when I get to drawing something. The thickness of the beak, where there's indentations of the beak, those types of details I'm very much interested in. So the photography's been a big boon. The other thing that I want to stress on my photography is that photography has helped me train my eye. The lens of a camera, there's mechanical parts to that lens. But you look at a photographer such as Ansel Adams and some of the other well-known photographers, and there's something more to that photograph than just the mechanics of a black and white photograph. His keen design sense that he is able to put his eye to the lens, adjust the lens, refocus the lens just a little bit, and take the shot. That has helped me tremendously enhance not only the photography, but has also led to helping me train my eye to be also taking that into my painting. And so, yes, I don't find that there's a conflict. For me, that's a very valuable tool that works hand in hand with what I try to do in my watercolors and my painting. We are told that, in my belief, and from a young boy, I enjoyed looking at the stars at night. And as I have been out in nature, repeatedly, I have seen the hand of our Creator at work. There's another element that I want to bring up by way of my relationship to God. I cannot take credit that these paintings are just all done by Steve West. I have prayed about. I have, as I have said earlier, there have been times where I've gotten into a jam, something just didn't turn out, and I've prayed about it. And I have been prompted to make corrections. I have been prompted that when I had to start over, I had an idea, the creative idea, to try something different. I count on, and part of me today is very strongly connected by way of listening to that small voice or that prompt that I get that says, try this, Steve, or keep pushing. The blue heron that's on the wall over there, a lot of my watercolors and paintings, I put layers of paint on. They're transparent layers, some are opaque layers, but the idea is that in so doing, within those layers, I'm able to create more color, but I'm also able to create more depth. And the wings, the blue, dark blue, purple wing of that blue heron is brought out because of the last layer that was added to several layers that made the high contrast for that three-dimensional effect against the darks. And so, yes, I count on those promptings to be able to do that. The greatest lessons I've learned from nature is that how each animal, each bird has a contribution to make to the environment, as well as relies on another species or another animal. And the same way with man, as man in the last 60, 80 years, we have drifted away from looking at nature, of really appreciating nature. Part of, I think, the problem we're faced today with our environment is that we have forgotten that we have a relationship that with the inhabitants of the animals and birds in our environment. And we owe to give back and to respect each creature, their space, and their contribution to the environment. And it is our responsibility to respect and to take care of the environment so that we can use it and they can use it. I think a beautiful example of this is, for hundreds of years, the Native American Indian lived in the Americas and basically cooked, lived, and without a trace. They were able to live and take responsibly without destroying or annihilating a particular species. They were sensitive to the fact that, yes, they could take a certain amount of fish out of the water, and then in turn they would give back to the waters something. In the same way it went with the vegetation, it went with everything they did. And the early Americans, one of the associations I have is with the mountain men in the Rocky Mountains. And the early trappers and fur traders learned a lot of their nature skills from the Native Americans. And again, those groups of people came into the land, took a certain portion out of it, and left the land without being damaged. I think we today, and my responsibility and my voice is to help us to say, we need to look, we need to appreciate, but then we need to do our part in making sure that our environment and these wonderful animals are around for our children and our children's children. We owe that to them, and it's important that we do that. I think the benefits of us, we moved from agricultural types of where we lived off the land to where now we push a button and we have electricity, we have gasoline in our cars. I think that, again, as a society, a nation, and a world, we need to look fast and hard today and say, can we, and we should, be able to do something in order to cut back or reuse, and with the new innovative thoughts of the new generations utilizing and coming up with ideas of substituting gasoline or other alternative fuel sources. We should be able to cut back so that our environment, that we shouldn't have problems with heat and the ice formations that are melting so fast. We ought to be able to cut back to where the wind turbines that are making power for us in Los Angeles and large cities that are killing birds and birds of prey, that we should be able to have substitutes of alternate ways in which to generate power to where we don't have to put the wildlife endangered, and we lose these wonderful creatures that we cannot ever bring back. So I think we have a responsibility, and we can do it. We must do it. My artistic influences came in high school. I was taking painting in high school, and my mother had a very close teaching friend that taught art at some of the elementary and high school. Her name was Matilda Thurman, and she had an interest or liked to see what I was doing, and she was my first and special mentor in that if I ran a problem, in a design problem in my painting or mixing a color, I could call Matilda and I said, I'm having a problem, can you help me? And I could drive down to her house, and she always had an open door. And she became a very special person that had a lot of patience. I've had 2 or 3 other mentors that have influenced me greatly by way of the way in which they approach their art and design. Another one is Andrew Wyeth. Andrew Wyeth has been a big influence in my life on 2 fronts. One, because of his skill in mastering in watercolor. They're fresh, but yet they're intense and they're detailed. Second is that, as he says it, he is thriving and drives himself to find the essence of design in the subject matter he's doing. It may be a person, it may be an old rusty milk can, but he finds the designs within the design, and I admire him very much. The third artist that I admire very much is a wildlife naturalist. His name is Robert Bateman. He's internationally known for his wildlife. And for me, his paintings and his wildlife portrayal of the surroundings, nature, and the animals, they breathe. They look like they breathe and are coming right off the paper or the canvas. And so again, he is a master in my eyes on being able to work with his media and work with a design that he finds in nature. And all 3 of these that I've mentioned have indicated through their artwork and personal testimony to me that they know that there's divine design in nature. And so, again, I draw to those as well as others that have voiced it in their paintings about that there is a divine creator in nature. I consider myself an artist and a conservationist. I think there is so much on this front of science that requires a lot more academic as well as a lot of research. I'm doing that myself, but I admire the scientists that take a special area of specialty and really delve into it. So where I think what I'm doing is I'm involving certain science elements in nature. I don't consider myself a scientist. I consider myself an artist that's bringing to the forefront through nature the elements that we are studying in the science field. There is a reason why I placed, for example, these 3 paintings where I did. In the show, I created what I call a series of paintings called the Trilogy of the Marsh. And you're going to find that the setting has water, sky, and a variety of vegetation. I'll talk a little bit later about the geometric shapes of the that's in these trilogy paintings, but I deliberately placed the trilogy paintings throughout the show. I was asked, and probably would be asked again, why didn't I put all the trilogy paintings together? I wanted to make this a united show. So where in the trilogy paintings, the viewer sees the geometric shapes a little bit more obviously by way of the whites and the color bands and the circles. And I want you to see the negative spaces that those wonderful beaks create in the background and on top of the bird. So it's the same idea of geometric shapes, one in which you're seeing more negative spaces, and on these you're seeing positive spaces with larger negative spaces that are painted rather than white. This is a fun painting in that this pelican posed, it seemed like he posed for me, but again, I wanted to bring out, look at the fun geometric shapes of the negative space. The negative space in between the tail feathers. So that's, I'm hoping the viewer will enjoy that by way of, yes, this is a pelican, but look at the beautiful negative space that he creates when he's in different gestures. And again, you see the more geometric shapes that are obvious in a trilogy painting. I was asked in regards to why, Steve, why do you put in those white bands in your painting? Well, initially my answer was I don't know. I was challenged by my professor, Steve, can you do something in your paintings to maybe put in more depth in your paintings using some type of geometric shape? And so that's what this got this concept started of the geometric shapes with the white space. Later on, as I thought about this, and I was challenged again about this with a professor in one of my critiques here at Azusa, it made me stop and think. My theme and the message I'm getting across to my viewer is that there is divine design in nature. What would happen if the divine creator, in his creating the earth and the creatures, left out and had bands of white or negative space in the objects that he created? Be kind of interesting, wouldn't it? It would be incomplete. That's one thought I came across. It might bring the attention to the viewer, the importance and the beauty that we have in nature, what we may call a complete picture, right? The other thing I wanted to bring out in this, by way of the geometric shapes and the absence of color, is that I wanted you to be aware of that our creation in nature, and even we as human beings, we're continually growing, we're evolving. Animals are evolving. Birds and feathers, animals, their sizes, shapes are changing through their environments, right? And so again, this is another concept that our creation and nature's creation is alive. It's not dead. It's not stagnant, that it's ongoing, it's changing, it's growing.